Hey leaders, Carey Nieuwhof here, and in this video I want to talk to you about the new Exodus. 4 reasons that so many people, including Christians, are suddenly leaving the church. So we have been through a meat grinder of a year in 2020, and some of the data that's been collected in the last few months is really kind of disturbing, and I want to talk to you about those trends, but I also want you to hear my heart on this. So I'm a fan of the local church. I love the local church. I've led in the local church. I believe in the future of the local church, but that said, sometimes your best friend is reality, and you just got to realize, okay, what was isn't anymore, and then as a result, how do you respond? So it seems, according to the data, and I'm using mostly Barna data here, that about 1 in 5 people, on average 22% of people who were regularly attending church in 2019, stopped in 2020. So as we open up a brand new year in 2021, it's like, what do you do with that? So if you look at the number of adults in the United States who would have said in 2019 that they never go to church, about 14% of adults in 2019 said, yeah, we've never been to church. In 2020, have you been to church since the pandemic? That number rose to 53% of all adults. So you're like, oh, okay. So they're not automatically turning to the church in a time of crisis. But then when you look at the same question when it was asked of Christians, that's where it really gets disturbing. Because in 2019, 0% of, quote, churched Christians, by the way, broke my thumb, that's what that is, okay, church Christians, and 0% also of practicing Christians would say in 2019 that they had never been to church. So 100% of them said, yeah, I've been to church in the last while. In 2020, about 19% and 22% respectively said they hadn't gone to church at all, period, digitally or in person. Reopened, whatever, they just hadn't gone to church since the pandemic. So that's a bit of an alarming trend. And when you actually add that into some of the other numbers we're seeing, like the average church that's reopened is seeing 36% of its former attendance. When you look at historic, like 20-year church attendance patterns, they've been in decline. It's not good news. So the question is, well, what do we do as a result? How do we respond to that? I want to share with you a couple of things. So before I get to those, though, I just want to say a lot of you, and I've seen this in the comments on my blog, I've gotten a written version of this post on my blog, people fight against it. They pick with the statistics and go, well, if you look at it this way, or you look at it that way, or are you really saying, or when was this taken? Because it's different now. Stop for just a minute, okay? If you look at all the data, it is not moving in an encouraging direction. So if you want to move this up 1 or 2 or 3% or explain it away, you can. But reality is you already knew prior to the pandemic it was getting harder and harder to get people to come to church. So now what do you do in response to it, right? Is this real is probably a better question to ask than is this right? Because you can argue with, well, I saw a different poll or whatever, but hey, I think we all see the writing on the wall. And you might say, well, my church is growing. And if your church is growing, that's amazing. I'm part of a growing church too. But just because you're the exception to the rule doesn't actually change the rule. So that's another thing to remember. So why are people dropping out of the church? I want to share 4 ideas with you. Number 1, I think we've been over-focusing on content at the expense of connection. So when all the churches pivoted online in the beginning of 2020 during the pandemic, some like our church had been there for a long time, but other churches, everyone's like, whoop, now we're online. We all focused on content, but we forgot about connection and community. And I think what people are really looking for is connection and community, because the reality is you can get content anywhere, right? You can get some of the best preachers in the world for free. So why are they going to go to your content when you can get content anywhere? I think the real goal of posting content online is not consumption, but connection and community. So what you want to have happen when someone watches a message is you want them to connect with you, connect with each other. You want to move them into community because it's relationship that's really sticky. So if you only focus on consumption, let's get those views up, let's get the engaged time up, that's great, but you've got to focus on content, connecting people into community. And when you do that, things are good. So the goal of digital content is actually connection, not consumption. Number 2, I think we have an obsession with attracting not equipping. So the old model of church was come to church, come to church, come to church. Look, we got a full room, right? Okay, we all feel good about ourselves. But we haven't really equipped people. My favorite metaphor for what happened in 2020 is that it's like the lake got drained and now we see what's at the bottom. And at the bottom was a lot of people who didn't feel equipped to live out their faith, let alone to share their faith or that sort of thing. So maybe focus a little bit more on equipping rather than just attracting people. Third reason I would say is Christian meanness on social media. I don't know about you, but over the last year, I've been tempted to delete my social media accounts more than once. And that wasn't just because of non-Christians. Often it was because of Christians. There's a meanness, a political meanness, an ideological meanness, an inhuman meanness on social media by Christians that is disturbing. And remember, your unchurched friends are watching. And when they see you as a church leader or church member posting negative, angry stuff, that's not very attractive. We need to look more like Jesus and less like angry people. 2020 was not the Christian world's finest moment on social media. Time and again, when the world needed love, Christians gave the world judgment. And then the fourth reason that I see people suddenly leaving the church is that a lot of churches made politics and ideology more important than theology. 2020 was a divisive year, very divisive year. But if you make politics and ideology more important than theology, you kind of miss the mission. Jesus didn't come to endorse a political candidate. He didn't come to elect a particular government. And again, that's true whether you lean right or left, progressive or conservative. It doesn't really matter. That is temporary. It is not eternal. And that's not why the church exists. It's not there to endorse a particular candidate. You're there to lead people to Jesus. So my hope is that Christians look, live, and sound much more like Jesus than just the candidate of their particular choice. Unchurched people aren't looking for Christendom. What they're looking for is Christ. And if you can deliver that to unchurched people, I think your church has a bright future. So I've got a written version of this post on my site. If you Google my name and New Exodus, you'll find it. I would love to know what you think. So here's what you can do with this video. Save it if you want to discuss it with your team. Leave a comment and then tag somebody who you think might benefit from seeing it. Love to hear from you in the comments. What are you seeing? And why do you think people are walking away from the church so quickly? I'd love to know what you think.